So thank you, everyone. Oh, I gotta go up to the mic. Thank you, everyone, for coming. So before we start, I gotta do the acknowledgement, which is also important to me because I am also Indigenous. The Southeast Tech Hub in Estevan acknowledges that we are located on the traditional lands referred to as Treaty 4 territory, the original lands of the Cree, of Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. So I think most of you know about the Tech Hub, but maybe not all of you, and some people online don't know. So the Southeast Tech Hub in Estevan is created to help diversify the economy in the Southeast Saskatchewan, especially around Estevan, to include technology and innovation. And we have some pretty amazing people from this city. We have Dr. Eric Grimson, who was here a while ago, Chancellor of MIT from 2011 to 2014. We have Jeff Sandquist. And we also have a lot of really good, innovative people. But we're not going to be talking about that. The other part of the main reason we're talking tonight is because of the changes in technology. It is so much easier to live a really good life in that you work in Toronto, you work in Vancouver, you work in Montreal, but you get the lifestyle of the real world. This is something that 5-6 years ago would have been really, really hard to do. So I don't want to talk anymore because everyone already knows all about me. So I'm going to now ask Tracie to come up and tell us about her lifestyle and how she is doing what I just said. Thank you, Tracie.
Awesome. Thank you, Gordon. So quite a few of you know who I am, but my name is Tracie, and I am here to talk to you about remote working in rural Saskatchewan. So today, what we will be running through is who am I and how did I get here? Some pros and cons of working remotely, some of the skills and tools that I use to have a remote work setup. And then I'm actually hoping that a few people might have some questions related to remote work or anything at all that I say during the presentation. Please feel free to reach out and ask. So who am I? I am Tracie. Like I said, I was born and raised here in Estevan, Saskatchewan. After I finished high school, I went to the University of Regina, and then I finished out my degree at the University of Western Ontario in 2011 out in London, Ontario. After that, I went on to get my master's in professional accounting in 2012 from the University of Saskatchewan, and I completed my what was called the CA, but now the CPA in 2014. I specialized in Canadian domestic tax after that, and that has kind of been all of my education related to that. And lucky for my parents, they've had to attend 4 full convocations that they've had to sit through. And I think in the last one, my dad was very pleased I was done. So a little bit more about who I am and my career path. So I started my career path out very traditionally. I took a role in public accounting at one of the Big 4 accounting firms where I worked in their audit division. I eventually was led back to Estevan a little early on in my career where I was working at the MNP office here in Estevan. Worked there for about 5 years. That's where I started to work with a lot of small business owners and really sort of found my stride in working with owner managers and doing tax planning for them. From there, my husband had a job opportunity to move to Calgary. So that's when I started looking for other opportunities of kind of where is my next career move. So at that point, I saw an ad on Facebook actually about an accountant that had traveled all around the world, and she was doing this thing called digital nomading. And I thought, that looks fun. I would like to give that a try. And I didn't really know where I was going with my career at that point. So I hopped on Google and I found a company called Connect CPA. And by the early 2017, I had accepted an offer working for them. It's always like a little bit scary joining a really small company. I had never met these people in person, and I just had to basically pray that they were actually real. But signed the contract, and eventually my equipment started showing up. So I figured it's probably okay. And I was employee 7 when I signed on. So we were really, really small back then. So now 6 years later, I have been with the company. I head up the accounting and tax department, so I manage about 22 people underneath me. But we are currently working on about employee 100. So we've grown from employees, I was employee 7, and now we're looking to hire employee 100. So really, really rapid growth over the last few years, but it's been a really fun ride to be on. So we are the largest cloud accounting firm in Canada right now. We are 100% remote, and we have been since day one, long before the pandemic. We were really lucky during the pandemic because while everyone was trying to figure out how to work from home, we were already completely set up and could keep going. So even though there were a lot of people that had a lot of struggles working in a remote environment, our team was really able to continue on. So we currently hire people from coast to coast. So we cover 6.5 time zones. That half is in Newfoundland because they need that extra half hour, I guess, to get going before we get there. And we have people out on Vancouver Island as well. So a little bit about Connect CPA. We're a public accounting firm, so we primarily service some small owner-managed businesses. Our main focus is technology, tech startups, a big focus on e-commerce, and all things digital. So like I said, the company has grown really quickly, and it's given me a lot of opportunities over the last 6 years. A little bit about what our first leap looked like into the remote work. We thought we would take full advantage of everything. So we sold all of our belongings when we were living in Calgary and purchased this travel trailer and lived in that for 6 months, which was one of the biggest benefits that we got right off the hop from working remotely. When we moved into this travel trailer, it really allowed us to align our values with what was important to us. Everything that we had to fit in 27 feet of trailer. So it was a really good time to realign everything that was important to us. The big benefits of it was obviously the prioritizing and as well as the cost savings and the mobility that we gained by living in the trailer. It allowed us to really figure out what we wanted as a family unit. So one of my biggest pros to being a remote worker is travel. It's definitely one of our biggest values as a family is the ability to travel and explore Canada. Specifically, Western Canada is where we really love to hang out. I think everybody can agree Western Canada is absolutely beautiful. So every year we try to spend at least 3 months traveling around, working remotely while we are visiting everywhere here. So this is one of my favorite lakes, Moraine Lake. It's just outside of Lake Louise. We've spent many days and many hikes there. And then another benefit of being able to travel is we can go all over, but we don't have to use any of our vacation days. So for my 30th birthday, this is a hike that I wanted to do. We travel on the weekends. We're stationary during the week, which is typically opposite of what a lot of people will try to do. So we only had to use one vacation day. I got to cross off North America's most thrilling hike, which is Crypt Lake. I have my dog on my back and she's staring straight down into the canyon, really questioning why she decided to join this family, but here we are and she made it to the top, so that's all that matters. The other great thing about working in a remote environment, which Gordon has kind of highlighted on in a lot of his TikToks and everything like that, is the affordability of settling in rural Saskatchewan. Obviously, it is significantly cheaper to live here than in Vancouver, Toronto, or even when we lived in downtown Calgary. Settling in rural Saskatchewan has definitely freed up a lot of cash flow for us, and it has provided us with even more opportunity to travel. So in November of 2022, we decided that we were going to go live and work in Arizona for a month. So it provided us the opportunity to go really immerse ourselves in another city for an entire month. My parents were able to come down and visit us, and it just allows us to really flex our schedule. The other part about moving back to rural Saskatchewan or to Estevan is housing affordability. So the house that we were able to purchase in Estevan provides us with a great home base. It has a backyard, which is really important for our dog, and it lets us have a space that is easy for us to live and work in. Our commute is super short. As Gordon mentioned, everybody arrives here between 7:25 and 7:30, and that's because we all know that we can get to basically anywhere in Estevan in 10 minutes or less. That's definitely not something that is afforded to you. If you live in a major center, you're planning for a night like this, you're leaving your house. If you're lucky, you get supper. Otherwise, you're going straight to an event like this and you aren't getting home until well after your kids are in bed. So something that we really love about here is that Estevan is really the 15-minute city, as long as you're not stuck by a train. The other thing that we love about remote work is the flexibility associated with it. So I am a morning person through and through. I hit my stride probably between like 7 and 8 o'clock in the morning. I can go hard at work until about noon, but in the afternoon, I definitely peter out. Works perfect for me. I work for Toronto, 2 hours time difference. So they're going super early in the morning. It works really well for me. And by 3 o'clock, a lot of them have gone home. So it's really quiet at work. I can just tie up loose ends. I'm not in a lot of meetings at the end of the day. I don't have to answer a lot of questions. So definitely the flexibility of being able to set your own schedule. We have a lot of people that work in Toronto that maybe are not necessarily morning people. Works out fine for them as well because they can start a little bit later. There's no need to be in the office at 8 o'clock in the morning. We're totally fine with them showing up at 9. It really comes into improving efficiency at work and getting the maximum productivity out of everyone. This is a big one for me, the people working remotely. And I get asked this question a lot is how do you get your social? This is Julia. Julia started working with me at Connect CPA in 2017 as well. She came on shortly after me when I showed up and I was the only female worker and I begged for another one. So they got me Julia. I have had the opportunity to meet up with Julia multiple times over the years. All of the tools, we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation, have provided me with the opportunity to really make a great connection with all of my coworkers. I really do feel like I'm just as close with all of my remote coworkers as I was with the ones that I was working with right here in Estevan. We've gone and lived in Victoria a few times now. This is Julia and I meeting up in Victoria, going out for coffee, just like any regular employee would do with their coworkers. So that's really important to me. Here's another picture with a few more of the people that I work with. I was able to fly out to Toronto, do a bunch of meetups. I worked from my hotel room for the week and was able to catch up. I have family in Toronto, so I could visit them, didn't have to use any of my vacation days, got to explore the city for a week, go to dinner with a bunch of people. Obviously, because I am based out of Toronto, a lot of the people that work at Connect CPA are also from Toronto, so I was able to meet up with a bunch of my coworkers then. And then finally, one of the things that I absolutely loved about the people and when I was working in Estevan was actually getting to physically meet with my clients. So I did get to meet with a lot of small business owners here in Estevan, and that was definitely something that I was missing. So what we did is, this is Two Guys with Knives. They're one of my clients. They're based out of Vancouver. When we were going through Vancouver, we ended up stopping, meeting up with them, getting a tour of their facility, leaving with a bunch of their snacks, which were all super delicious. So the point is that even if you're not meeting up with people in person every single day, there are plenty of other ways that you can interact with your coworkers and your clients. And I don't really feel like I've missed out on anything. I feel like I have formed very, very strong relationships being a remote worker. So what are some of the challenges of working remotely? So the first thing is, with flexibility does come a lot of commitment. So this could mean that even if you are parked by the most beautiful river and the most beautiful set of mountains, you still have to make sure that you are coming to work. So making sure that you understand the flexibility also comes with responsibility. Another challenge that we face, and it's not for everyone, but it is definitely for some people, if you are a remote worker and you are choosing to flex the lifestyle and travel, it's getting used to working in tiny spaces. This is a picture of our truck camper. This is approximately the size of our desk, which both of us have to share. So getting used to making sacrifices for the lifestyle is working in a tiny, tiny space 8 hours a day to make sure that all of your work gets done. But it definitely does still offer you the flexibility, so I still wouldn't change anything with that. And the final challenge is, or another challenge that I have, is coordination. So as I had mentioned earlier, this is definitely something that you have to get used to. We operate across 6.5 time zones, or we have a 6.5-hour time difference between some of our employees. So we have to make sure that we are constantly coordinating with not only them, but our clients. Clients are always going to think in their own time zone. They might not necessarily know where you're based out of. Most of them have never even been to Saskatchewan. So it's always important that you are very cognizant of what time zone you're operating on and what time zone they're operating on. Because some of our West Coasters show up just as our East Coasters are finished. It involves a lot of communication over the various tools that we have to communicate with each other, making sure that at the end of the day, I have all of the East Coast tasks lined up so that when they show up the next morning, they have stuff to do, all of their questions have been answered. But then also so that when I roll into work first thing in the morning, works out great for me, I'm ready to answer questions and move on with that. So something that you do have to be aware of, especially if you're working across multiple time zones, is just being flexible with your time. The other issue can be is if we are out on Vancouver Island and my clients are based out of Toronto, it can mean hauling us out of bed at 4:30 in the morning, driving into town to get Wi-Fi, and taking that meeting at 5 a.m. So there are definitely some drawbacks when you are flexing your time across the way. But again, it all depends on what fits your lifestyle. And the final challenge, which I'm sure that you guys have figured out, is self-discipline. There are for sure days that I would prefer to not be at work, and I think that everybody else could probably relate to that as well. The difference between what I have and somebody that works in a traditional office environment is there is no bums in the chair. People are counting on you to show up to work. So it takes a lot of self-discipline to make sure that you're there Monday through Friday, working your full workday. Remote work only works if you do. So that is definitely a big challenge, and it's definitely something that people need to consider before they decide to take on a remote work position. Awesome. Okay, so maybe some of you are interested in how should I be a remote worker? So the first thing that I did when I decided that I wanted to be a remote worker was I did a personal review. What are the skills that I bring to the table? What is it that I could use to move online? And even just what does my regular job look like? And is it possible to move it online? Or am I willing to retrain to make it an online position? I was really lucky. I had an accounting position. It actually translated across really, really well to working in a remote environment. My husband was less lucky with his background. He had to retrain himself to create a remote position for himself and then eventually get hired onto a company. So the first thing that I always say is do a personal assessment. What are you willing, what can you bring to the table? Or what are you willing to do to retrain yourself to become a remote worker? The other items are tools and setup. I cannot stress this enough if you are going to be a remote worker, is having a proper office setup. If you come to our house, you will see 2 office setups, dual monitors, microphones, webcams, the whole shebang, just as if you were working in a regular office. Having a place where you can go be productive that is completely separate from your home life is so, so important, just from a productivity perspective, but also from being able to shut the door and leave your work at work. Similarly, we have the same setup on the road. We have dual portable monitors. We have a second headset. We have our webcams, everything like that. Making sure that you're properly set up wherever you are is going to make you the most successful in your remote work environment. Some of the applications that we use to be in constant communication with each other, my top ones are Slack and Zoom. Personal preference, there's also Microsoft Teams. There's Skype, I think still. It's Teams now? Okay, it's Teams now. But there are plenty of communication. Video on is always the best in my opinion. It creates a better environment. It's more collaborative in my opinion. So making sure that you have the proper tools and setup if you do decide to be a remote worker is really important. You're not going to last very long if you are hunched over your laptop typing like this all day to make sure. But if you have a proper setup, it's going to make it a lot more enjoyable, but it's also going to make you a lot more productive. So that being said, I have been a remote worker for the last 6 years. I do think it is a wonderful opportunity. I can't stress that enough. I have absolutely no regrets about leaving the traditional office environment and changing into a remote worker. I love having all of the benefits of living in a small town, while also still getting to maintain visiting all of the big centers and getting sort of all of that city life that I also enjoy, as well as camping and doing everything that I wanted to do with our family. So with that, I will open the floor to any questions, if there are any.
Here, how about I add to the fuel here?
Okay.
So, and then, so I are part owner and founder, and don't run away. I'm just adding more to the discussion. We still need you. Founder, director, and I'm still a president of IDS Internet Dispatch Services. It's a multinational software company providing final mile logistic, reverse logistics software, Canada, United States, and Australia. And to this end, in February, we shut down our last office. Everyone in Australia, Melbourne, Sydney, Vancouver, all work from home. And your point there about the time zones is huge, because that's one of the advantages, because we work 24 hours because of those time zones. So the thought I've always had as a president, and now retired but still on the board, is that how can communities like Estevan take advantage of the younger generation not wanting to live in the city anymore and have these new tools and skill sets, which is part of the reason with the Tech Hub, like how can this building, this space that we're creating culturally and physically is about trying to attract some of those businesses to act like that. And if you're watching online and you're saying, as a business owner, what do you get out of it? Well, in Vancouver, I would have to pay my programmers 30 to 40% more just so they can have a decent lifestyle in Vancouver. And my end customer doesn't care, right? They don't care that I'm paying an employee 30% more because in Vancouver. They're just all about return of investment. And in this, having people come to Estevan or setting up a shop here will reduce your costs. So with all of that, what questions do you have, or what thoughts do you have as a community to help the younger generation stay here, because they can work from home, or bring more of the younger generation back, or bring more businesses into Estevan in this way? So some thought there too. There we go.
I don't know if this is a concern for ourselves, but for we have to be licensed in each province that we practice in. So there are healthcare options available to work online, but there's no kind of easy way to create that qualification that goes across provincial boundaries. Have you come across that in your own work?
Yes, absolutely. So I am a CPA and I am licensed in Saskatchewan, but we do have CPAs licensed across the country as of right now. As long as you have a CPA that is in the province, and our clients are primarily based out of Ontario, we haven't run into any licensing issues. That being said, we did come across our first time where we have actually got pushback from a different province that I was not licensed in, but we ended up, there was another girl on our team that was licensed, so she was able to take over that. But that is definitely a barrier across almost all of the professions, is my understanding. Depending on which province you're living in, we are regulated by our home office location. So I'm regulated by CPA Saskatchewan, but a lot of other people would be regulated by CPA Ontario, BC, depending on where you are. That is something that you have to come across or have to look into. But yes, I only have to be licensed in CPA Saskatchewan, or in Saskatchewan, to practice as a CPA here. But I'm certain that, especially when it comes to healthcare, there's a few more hoops that need to be jumped through. When I moved to Alberta, I had to get re-licensed there. There are definitely a lot of paperwork associated with it.
To your healthcare, here's an interesting thing. Sorry, James, but a lot of the international medical doctors, IMGs that we have working in our community are not licensed to work in Ontario and BC. So as a side note, those doctors work in the evenings doing telehealth back to BC and Ontario. So if you're a doctor looking for a place, you can come here and work in both provinces legally. Just a thought. James?
Just to build off of the last question, did you find that clients, when they found out when they were looking for a CPA, when you told them that we're 100% remote, we don't have an office, we don't have, is that a deterrent in any of your aspects of your work, or did that really be a non-issue?
For us, it's a non-issue because they can't find us anywhere physically. So we primarily only focus on the tech industry. We are seeking out people that want to work in a tech-forward environment. That's really our niche client. That is where we hang out the best. That is where we can service our clients the best. If we are looking for somebody that really wants to meet their accountant in person, that's just not where we thrive. So those are not people that we target. There are so many young, brilliant entrepreneurs in this country that have just unreal ideas, that are looking for an accounting firm that might not be your traditional accounting firm, that is able to automate a lot of the processes, a lot of the back end, where they are also looking to build out a remote team. So for us, it hasn't been a barrier yet, but it's also just hasn't ever been our focus.
Anyone else?
This isn't really a question, but I just wonder what your thoughts are, Tracie. Or like, there's a lot of talk now of, since COVID's over, people are being asked to move out of home and back into the physical buildings so that they support the local establishments around where they're working, such as the restaurants, those kinds of things. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on, like, is that a legitimate concern, or?
I think with all change, there is always growing pains associated with it. Right now, obviously, if you go into downtown Toronto or downtown Vancouver, of course, they want the people down there because that's where they've decided to set up their businesses. But that doesn't mean that somebody in the suburbs that maybe didn't used to get the lunch crowd, now they're getting people that are just quickly running out from their house to whatever, to pick up whatever. So everybody was required to innovate in COVID. And I think that it sparked a lot of like really cool things, new restaurants. And I do think that the restaurant industry will shift. So is it a concern? Yeah, absolutely. But do I think that people can innovate from it? For sure. I definitely think they can. If you look here in Estevan, I would guess pre-COVID, we hardly had any online ordering, would be my guess. But now all of my favorites, Blackbeard's, the Tap House, you can go online, you can place your order. They innovated and they really rose to the challenge. A business that has been established for a very long time in this community has always operated on an in-person. That's what they thrive on, is their in-person service. But they were still able to innovate during the pandemic and move their business online. And I think that it helped them to survive through the pandemic and even thrive. Yeah.
I think that's it. So our family has about 12 or 13 years of experience working remotely, and it isn't so much less money spent going out into the economy, it's just where it's going is very different than it would be that, and our experience is primarily East Coast and Europe work, so we're always like working like ahead, which makes it really convenient for here, especially Ontario and East Coast being hours ahead. But I think that's the big thing, is that you adjust where those dollars are being spent. So you're not necessarily doing the lunches out, but that money is maybe larger meals, takeout wise, or on the weekend, just because you work remotely. And I think a lot of people have this picture of everybody that has started working remotely. We're just like in homes all the time. And my husband was worked from home out of the Netherlands for 12 years. And we were a very normal family, looked very normal. It's just he didn't leave the house. And one of the other things, if you're a family, that works really great is that by the time that you're done your day, you still have that many more. If you're working like towards the east and you're hours ahead, you've got that many more hours at the end of your day to put towards family than you would if you were kind of in your own time zone.
Absolutely. That is definitely something that is like a high priority at Connect CPA. We've got kindergarten drop-off, kindergarten pickups. Those are all really important. It allows a lot of our employees to really flex their schedules. So I have somebody that is working on Vancouver Island right now. He has a 5-year-old daughter. Every morning he starts working at 5 a.m. his time. That's his choice. But he is able to do kindergarten drop-off at 9 o'clock in the morning. And by the time she's done school at the end of the day, he's able to pick her up and spend the whole afternoon with her because he's already put in his full day by the time she is done school. So they are gaining so much extra time with their families.
Anyone else with thoughts or questions?
I just have a quick question. I'm just wondering, for young people working remotely, what would your advice be as far as the education that they're getting with college or university? Is there some other things that they would need to know technology-wise and educate themselves with?
The biggest, you learn everything on the go. Technology is always changing. Even from when I started working at Connect CPA, our tech stack from when I started on day one is completely different from where we are today. The universities are a great tool for teaching the fundamentals. They're a great tool for teaching you to think in different ways, as well as create like long-lasting relationships. But in terms of learning the technology or skills like that, it really just is self-taught where you want to go, what you want to do, and it'll really be dependent on your industry. So for young people that are in university, that are looking for a remote position, I would say if you can find someone, if you are in accounting, see if you can connect with somebody that is an accountant that is doing it, and they can just provide you with, right now in this moment, this is the tech stack that we are currently using. I know the universities used to teach QuickBooks Desktop. That was the original accounting platform that they would use. Some of them, Xero and QBO, have gotten into the universities now. Those are now our two big automated or online accounting platforms. So when it comes to technology, it's really fast moving and young people can pick it up almost instantaneously. That is definitely like the least of my worries. Yes. So as long as they're really willing, the biggest thing about working in a tech environment is being open to change. And as long as you're willing to do that, somebody is always willing to teach you sort of what you need to do.
We started on our at home 30 years ago with my guys. I had 2 people, but the biggest equipment they had to have was a fax machine. Anybody know what that is?
What's that?
And so I had guys in Calgary, Edmonton, Lloydminster, Taber. They had a cell phone, which was almost just after the bricks, and fax, and they just worked from home. And I've always been a strong believer in it for years. And this is my son, in case anybody doesn't know who I am, and my daughter-in-law. And so when they went remote, I was always proud of what they did and how they just made it work. And I've got a new company that I've started in the last 4 or 5 years, and I have no offices in Estevan, but I've got guys working in Estevan. Right now, just work from home. And once in a while, we'll get together, and maybe once a week, we'll get together for an hour. But if you can game and you can run a computer, you can work from home as long as you have the dedication to be productive.
What's the business that you're running out of?
I can't tell you.
Oh.
ALX, Artificial Lift Works, the pump jack down the street here, the yellow head on it. So my materials guy works from home. His son is another materials guy. I just hired an engineer that's going to work from his apartment in town here. And I work from home. And I mean, we have 2 shops, or 2 shops. And it's pretty hard to weld from home, but all the trades guys go to the work, but anybody that's in administration is at home. It's pretty slick. I like it. And the biggest thing that my brother always, he had a big company in Calgary, he says, buildings are cheap. He says, it's the people you put in them that cost some money. So it's not costing the company less money other than the rent, right? All the equipment, the computers, the wages are still there. As long as you can have some type of way to determine whether you're getting your money's worth out of the people, and most people are good. There's some that are just lazy SOBs, but the vast majority of people I find just, no matter where they are, you give them a task to do and you understand what they should get done, and if it's done, I don't care. Like, if I see them downtown at 3 o'clock pissing around and I know what everything I wanted done is done, I don't care. It just works so slick. So, just my 2 bits.
Thank you. That was great 2 bits. Anyone else with thoughts or questions?
Question.
Yeah.
How do you maintain confidentiality and protection of personal information for your clients?
Yeah, so similar to probably everybody, and I know that this is probably James's favorite thing, password protection. So everybody is educated on the password protection as well as confidentiality. And then we also implement the VPNs to make sure that any information that is transmitted back and forth is protected that way as well. But we use a password manager called OnePass, and 2-factor is always implemented on every application that does have it, which is almost all of them at this point. We all have 2-factor implemented on that too. So, and then we always have to go through all our basic training of keeping confidentiality just in general.
That's a great question. Anyone else? I'll just put this back on. So thank you very much for doing this, Tracie. Don't turn off. I just really like one thing. I know I like to talk. I'm sorry, but the whole point of all this is like when I showed up a year ago, I was like, this place is a gold mine. Why does everything? I think you might agree. Everything in Toronto or Vancouver, Montreal, yeah, what you think or know, what you think you know about Saskatchewan is wrong. And I think that Saskatchewan could do itself a really good service by taking advantage of this new cultural change and encourage more. And I would love to see that this presentation becomes more and that we do more and more and more. So I hope to do another panel and find some more of us in the fall after harvest, maybe, because it is Saskatchewan. So thank you very much for coming. I appreciate it.
Yes, thanks everyone.
Okay, you can say anything now.